Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of True Scary Stories. Tonight's story is called Gone for Help. I live in a small town in northern Ontario, Canada. The founders built the town on a mountainside. A dense forest surrounds it. The mine closed years ago, so the town caters to snowbirds who leave the harsh winters for Florida. There isn't much for teenagers to do except party at each other's houses, drink beer and play video games. We hang out at the beach during the summer and hike through the forest year-round. Last winter, over the Christmas break, me and my best friend Steve went for an afternoon hike. We wore snowshoes and each carried our hunting knife. We bundled up very well, wool sweaters and hats, thick gloves, you name it. The temperatures are well below zero at that time of year. The wind chill makes it much worse. Steve and I trekked into the wilderness for an hour before coming across a frozen lake. Many small bodies of water dot the forest, but a fishing hut sat atop this one. We walked across the ice to check it out. No one was there, and a large lock prevented us from entering. The ice cracked beneath our feet. It startled me, but I didn't worry as it was thick enough to support us. Regardless, we crept back to shore and continued our journey. We climbed a steep hill next to the lake, then along a narrow ridge. A shelf of snow collapsed beneath my step. I tumbled down the side of the hill, twisting my ankle. Steve climbed down and helped me stand. I tried to put weight on it, but it was impossible. Steve helped support me by throwing my arm over his shoulders, and we attempted to walk back to the car. This proved to be slow and laborious. When we got back to the fishing hut, I realized we needed a new plan. We tried using our cell phones but couldn't get reception that deep in the forest. Steve said he would leave me there and return with help, extra people in a sled so they could drag me out. I didn't like the idea of being left alone, but I didn't have a choice. I told Steve the only thing I worried about was the severe cold. We went to the fishing hut and used the butt of my snowshoe to break the lock. It sat 2 people at most and contained no supplies, but it provided me with the extra protection against the elements. Steve left and promised to return as soon as possible. The first hour lasted forever. I played a game on my phone but stopped, thinking it might be a good idea to conserve the battery. 1 hour soon turned into 3. I wondered what was taking Steve so long. It only took an hour to reach the fishing hut. I became worried after 4 hours with no sign of him. It was almost dark and the temperature was dropping fast. I was freezing, even bundled up inside the hut. Nighttime temperatures were known to drop to 50 degrees below zero with the wind chill. I'd be in trouble if I didn't get some warmth. I curled up as best I could to make use of my body heat and ended up falling asleep. I woke a couple of hours later to the sound of howls coming from beyond the shoreline. The only animals I worried about were black bears and mountain lions, but I was sure they were not making the sound. The intermittent cries lasted an hour before stopping. I can't say I was sorry to hear them end. Soon after, I heard footsteps approaching the hut. I thought it might be Steve, but realized they were approaching from the wrong direction. Furthermore, it sounded like only one person and not a rescue party. My hope turned to the hut's owner. He may be out to fish or check on the place, I thought. However, as the footsteps got closer, the ice began to crack, and not the kind of cracks Steve or I made. These cracks were made by something big. I could tell whoever it was stood several feet from the hut when their footsteps stopped. I heard heavy breathing that verged on a low growl. Nothing added up to a bear, so if it was an animal, I had no idea what kind. Whatever it was let out another loud howl, almost a screech. I was so scared, I backed up against the wall furthest away from it. I pulled my phone out and turned on the flashlight app, shining it at the far wall in hopes of identifying the creature between the hut's wooden slats. I remembered the door could be open, so I grabbed its handle to make sure it was at least shut tight. Something struck the side of the hut as I pulled on the door. I let go and resumed my cowering position against the far wall. It struck again with such force the hut's far side rose off the ground. Without thinking, I yelled at whatever it was to stop. Everything fell silent for a moment. I heard the footsteps walk to my side of the hut. The ice cracked under each step. I glanced over my shoulder and felt its husky breath squeeze through the slats against my neck. It grunted. I jumped to the other side. It struck the door this time, lifting the hut off the ice. The hut didn't fall down this time, however. The animal had grabbed onto the bottom, holding it up. It deposited the hut onto its side. I landed with a thud that hurt my shoulder. To my horror, the hut's door burst open in the fall. It could now enter with no effort. I raised my phone with great hesitation in order to shine its light on whatever might come through. The hut started sliding over the ice, gaining speed as it went. I dropped my phone and reached out, trying to find anything to hold on to. I gave up and braced for any potential collision. It hit the shore, rolling up, balancing on a corner before crashing down. The doorway was facing up now and I lay at the bottom. It peered at me through the door. The phone's light was pointing in my direction. It could see me, but I couldn't see it. I huddled in the corner trembling and removed my hunting knife from its sheath. I pointed the knife at it and screamed for it to go away. I kept screaming, losing complete control until I could scream no more. I could hear it walking away once I stopped. Soon I felt safe and I picked up my phone, stood through the doorway and shined the light in its direction. I couldn't see a thing. It had disappeared. I didn't sleep at all that night as I waited for its return. Early the next morning, the hut's owner came by. I was half frozen by that time. He was able to get me help. I was taken to the local hospital where I recovered from exposure for a few days. Steve never made it home. A search team attempted to locate him for weeks but failed. A couple of hikers ran across his body in the spring, or what remained of it. There were torn bits of clothing, a few teeth, and small bits of bone. Officially, his death was ruled an accident. Experts claim that he probably got lost and died from exposure. Animals were responsible for his condition. In my opinion, he ran across the same animal I did, and it wasn't a bear or mountain lion.